We have now this new U.S. tariffs policy based on a chart that was displayed, showing in one column the level of a country's tariffs on the U.S. and in the other the half of that the U.S. kindly will now charge them and no more. For a start, a country is not a single entity, and this is trade across a whole range of products. How will this ever be worked out and implemented?
Well, the idea is that they're trying to make it easier for the United States to levy differential tariff rates across countries, because if you did it by product, it would be overwhelming, and we probably don't have the bureaucratic resources to figure out how to do that. So what they've done is seemingly taken averages across sectors, added in a tariff equivalent for non-tariff barriers, and come up with a number, cut it in half, and that will be the rate charged on all imports from that country.
So every country faces at least 10% tariffs, and the bad guys, the average half of their tariffs above those of the US, if that's above 10%. Is that right?
That's right.
So India exports jewelry to the US, it exports pharmaceuticals, so many other goods. So what will the exporter of each product now have to figure out?
They're going to have to figure out what the rate is for India as a whole, because you're thinking again about products, and that's not how this is being calculated. To do this by product would be overwhelming. So instead, what they're doing is they're saying that on average, across pharmaceuticals, jewelry, and everything else, the rate that India will pay is 26%. So regardless of whether it's jewelry or a pharmaceutical product, the rate inbound into the U.S. will be 26.
Exports go directly from one company to another, not through governments. So what will governments now have to figure out?
It's beside the point. The reality is that the Trump administration has forced this all onto these countries to figure out for themselves. It will probably be shortly following up with an external revenue department, which will moreover somehow go to the exporter itself and figure out how to levy some kind of duty before the good ships from India. So what governments are going to have to figure out, and we're still waiting for the executive order to flesh out some of these details, is there a chance that India could go to the Trump administration and bargain this rate down by virtue of reciprocating something lower than what the U.S. has India pegged at, which is 52.
We've had week-long trade talks in Delhi between a U.S. trade official and officials in India, and we were told that these talks were very productive. So could a possible trade agreement arising from these talks override these reciprocal tariffs, or was all that just a waste of time?
Great question. I'm sure that Canada and Mexico are asking the exact same thing as we speak. The issue here is, will trade agreements mean anything going forward? And is it worth it for India to engage in bilateral talks when, one, the rate may never go to zero, and two, the deal might not shield Indian exporters from ad hoc tariffs declared almost under any reason the president can come up with?
What if there's a difference in the data between what one country holds and what the US holds? That certainly is the case with India. Some of Trump's numbers have been way off the mark. So in the end, what prevails? Is it what the US says it is?
It would appear so. And India is not the only country saying that at this moment.
And what will all these countries now do? Apply reciprocal tariffs? And would the US then add those added tariffs to the numbers it already has for their tariffs and then charge half of the extra more? Where will all this end?
Your guess is as good as mine right now, because this isn't the last tariff salvo. I'm sure we are going to all see more tariffs added later on down the road. My bet is a lot of countries, minus Canada, minus the EU, which are already retaliating. Question mark on Mexico, which is contemplating retaliation, that there's going to be a lot of digesting of what this really means. Everyone's going to wait for some of the details. A lot of questions still remain. The most notable one being, because Trump is still waiting for a study that was due today on which countries the U.S. should negotiate free trade deals with. A lot of the countries that make that list, like the UK, are going to be making phone calls tomorrow asking, if we were to get a free trade deal with you, would that number that you've pegged us at go to zero? And what assurances would you give us that we would not be hit with national security tariffs on other products in the future? And by the way, how many of these tariffs are getting stacked on top of each other? So if we take the 10% baseline, is that with or without the steel tariffs? Is that with or without fentanyl tariffs? Is that with or without sectoral tariffs like lumber in the case of Canada, pharmaceuticals in the case of India? How many of these things are we adding up?
Are we saying that President Trump has made this announcement without thinking it through?
Well, I can tell you this. Treasury is not due for 180 days to deliver a proper analysis of the general equilibrium effects of these tariffs. So, yes, I am saying that Trump moved before any rigorous analysis was completed.
And is America celebrating in an extension of the Rose Garden Party?
Not at all. This is not Liberation Day. This is Recession Day. And the tariffs are wildly unpopular in the United States. And it's just a matter of waiting for the stock market and the data on job loss, et cetera, to start rolling in before you see a real turn of heart, even on the part of Republicans in Congress.